Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name's Ryan, campus pastor here of our Akron East campus of Grace. And if we haven't met yet, love to meet you, maybe hear how you made your way to the campus today. And before we even jump into our conversation and series for the day, I want to tell you about something that's coming up here, especially if you've been coming to Grace maybe for the last handful of weeks or months, or maybe even if this is your first time, and you're wondering kind of what's my next step? What do I do next? Outside of just coming to services here on the weekends. And I want to make sure that that is super clear for you, and that is to jump into a discovery group. And if you haven't taken that step yet, it's really simple. It's a 4-week group that we host after our second service on Sunday. We feed you lunch, watch the kids, and then we just kind of take some time to walk through who we are and what we're about here at Grace, and what kind of our vision is for the church. And so if you've never taken that step, make sure to look for that. That's going to be coming up here in September, and I'd love to have you be a part of that, and I think you'll be glad that you did. And then we're starting a new series today. I'm excited about it. It's going to be all about wisdom. We're going to be looking through the book of Proverbs and talking about getting wisdom, finding wisdom, and wisdom is just something I think that is universally applicable to us. We know, I think, that we need wisdom. If you want to be good at the parts of your life that you're involved in and committed to, if you want to be a good parent, or if you want to kind of find the right career and be effective at it, if you want to have a great marriage, wisdom is going to need to be a part of our lives to kind of see those things play out. And so we all, I think, deep down know that we need that, and how we get it and where we find it and what the process looks like of seeing that actually show up in our lives is the part that we want to talk about. Where does that come from and how does that play? And we're going to spend a lot of time in the book of Proverbs, and I'm excited about doing that. Proverbs is a little bit of a different book of the Bible. It's in some ways, it's really easy to grab hold of. There are a lot of short, really small, short sayings, and almost like you would read a fortune cookie and kind of get something to grab hold of. It almost feels like that when you're reading it. Of course, it's the inspired word of God, not a fortune cookie. But, of course, that's kind of the makeup of it, is it's an easy, short line to read and grab hold of and grab some wisdom. And so we're going to see that and see kind of how that all plays out. But I'm going to give us just a starting definition of wisdom that we're going to be working with here for the next bunch of weeks as we kind of dive into some different places that wisdom's going to show up. So here's going to be our definition: the art of living and loving well. Super simple. What is wisdom? It's the art of living and loving well. And of course, we're going to take that from God's perspective. Like, according to God, what does it look like to live and to love well? And so over the next bunch of weeks here, we're going to be looking at things like friendship and relationships and money and responsibility and even the use of our words and how wisdom is going to apply to some of those different areas. And if you think about maybe ways that we tend to, or maybe see in our culture, ways that people or we tend to blow up our lives or blow up relationships, if you kind of inverted that and figured out what could I do now to not have that happen in my life, that's a little bit what we're going to do. How do we avoid the big pitfalls in relationships and in life, and how do we walk in wisdom? So I'm excited about that. I think Proverbs, when I first started reading the Bible, was one of the first books of the Bible that I grabbed hold of, and it was just exciting to grab hold of and to know there's a place to go to really find God's perspective on places of life that are really easy to put into practice. So it's going to be a super practical series. But today what we want to do is kind of lay the foundation for the conversation. And of course, this part is super, super important. And the writer of Proverbs is going to say something that at first doesn't totally make sense. But once we unpack it, I think it's really applicable and makes a ton of sense. Here's what he's going to say in Proverbs 9:10. He says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And let's walk into that and explain what that means a little bit. Because when he says, let me just address fear of the Lord a bit, and then we'll kind of unpack it. So we're talking about fear of the Lord. This is not the idea of terror or being afraid that that God's going to like destroy me in a moment, or that he's temperamental. It is the idea of a deep reverence, right? A deep respect and a deep trust that we would have in God. Think of the image of a super healthy dad, whether you had this dad or not, but think of a dad that you really respect and their relationship with their kids, right? That's kind of fear of the Lord. Like I think when I think of dads that I respect a ton and I watch their kids interact with them, there's a sense of healthy respect and even fear. Like they're not worried that they're going to get disowned. They're not worried that their dad's going to destroy them. But there's a sense of like, man, my dad might find out about this. I'm not going to do that, right? Because there's health. There's a fear there. There's a reverence there. And when the writer of the Proverbs is saying, if you want to know where wisdom starts, the beginning point of it, the starting line of it is this idea of fear of the Lord. Here's how this kind of makes sense to me. So I'm a pretty simple guy, so I like to draw pictures and kind of make sense on the whiteboard. So here's how this makes sense to me, and here's what I think we tend to do, at least this is what I would tend to do, is when I was younger, right, when I was like in school, I would tend to recognize that I would look at my perspective and it would be very limited, and I would think at the moment that I knew some things, and I did, and then what would happen is I would get older, a little bit of time would pass, and then, right, I would be kind of a different version of myself over a few years later. You know that that's true for all of us, right? That we're not the same all the time, and then we continue on. We kind of change. We become different people. We grow. And then as I grew more, my perspective would get bigger, and then here's the way I would tend to think of it at the time, and often I'm tempted to think that way now, is I would look back to the old me, what I knew and the wisdom that I had before, and I would tend to think, man, you didn't know anything, right? Like your perspective was garbage. You didn't know anything. Now I really know things. I really have wisdom now. I didn't so much then, but now I have wisdom because now I'm where I am, right? I've now arrived somewhere. You know, I'm like 20 or 25 or whatever, or 30 or 35 or 40. And we kind of keep doing this in life. It's really tempting to think this way because we'll live a little bit more life and we'll kind of do things that make sense or don't make sense. And then our perspective will grow and we'll look back on that perspective that we used to have and say, man, I didn't really know anything at the time. Let me give you an example. So when I had a different home that I was in, we lived in this house in Monroe Falls that I loved a ton. It was a blast. And when we bought this house, we had a back porch, like sliding doors, and you walked out onto this nice little deck area, right? And it was great. It was great setup. So you walked onto this little deck, and then you dropped down a couple steps, and there was like a lower platform deck too. And so it was a great spot, great place to hang out. The problem with it is that the wood was like starting to go, right? Starting to get spongy. You ever see wood get spongy? And it was like, this feels a little bit like a trampoline. If I have too many people on this at once, we're gonna go through it. And I'm like, I gotta replace the wood on this thing. And it was perfect. The deck was the exact size of the longest deck boards, right? I didn't have to make any cuts. Awesome. So I borrowed a truck because I didn't have one. I loaded up the back of the truck with all the boards. Took it from Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, wherever it was. Unloaded them, did it all, put it all on, and it was awesome. Right? Great. I go to do the next deck, right? The one underneath it. Same situation, spongy wood, same size deck boards. No problem. I'll borrow a truck, get the boards, replace them. Done. Project solved. I felt like a man, right? It was going to be amazing. And I go to borrow a truck. I borrow a different truck this time. And I go to Home Depot or Lowe's, I can't remember which one, and I load all this wood into the back of the pickup, and I'm just standing there looking at it. I'm like, man, this just doesn't look right. It seems like this wood is sticking out further out of the truck than the last truck that I was in. That's fascinating because last time it worked totally great, no big deal. I drove it back, got the wood off pickup, and we're good to go. So I stood there and I looked at it for a while, and it just kind of looked like it was sagging too far, you know. And I'm like, okay, but you know, I did it. I'm gonna take the risk. I'm just gonna drive. Right, and drive home, and we're gonna be great. So I start driving, and my heart's beating fast because I'm a little bit worried. I'm looking out the rearview mirror, and we were going over some bumps, and we made it for a while, and then eventually I hit a sizable bump, and the entire load of wood goes out of the back of the pickup and lands completely in one perfect pile in the middle of the street. To the point where I stopped, and I'm like, now what do I do, right? Do I unload the boards? Do I just sit there and say, I'm a fool, right? Like, this is what a fool looks like. So I did what every smart guy did. I called my father-in-law and said, please save me. And I called him, and he laughed the whole way there, and we loaded it up. And then I sat on that load of wood all the way home and prayed to God that I wasn't the next pile that landed in the street, right? But I would have looked at that situation and said, Ryan, if you were so dumb here, man. Like, how did you not know that pickup was a different size pickup than the other one? That bed was just a little bit shorter. And if you would have just known that, you would have done something different. And then, boy, that's certainly true. That life is going to teach us stuff, and we are going to gain some wisdom along the way, right? You and I all know that. We could all tell stories like that of things that we biffed, we blew it on, and we learned, and we're a little wiser for it. And that's awesome. That's all good and fine. But what's fascinating is the writer of the book of book of Proverbs is going to say this. That's not really where wisdom starts. That's normal wisdom. That's good wisdom. We should glean from that and gain from that. And if I ever go down that road and do a project, I'm going to make sure to check how long the back of a pickup is. What he's going to say is really this. He's going to say, if you want to understand where wisdom actually starts, you have to go to this fear of the Lord thing. This is really the beginning point. And here's what he's basically going to say, is this. He's going to say, hey, you and I and people around us are going to have degrees of wisdom based on our life experience and based on our learning, right? It's good, it's fine, it's wonderful. And there's a reality that exists that at the end of the day, the real unlimited wisdom and perspective that God has of all creation, from all of time and all of history, from the beginning to the end, only God has that. And really, when someone makes the recognition that their perspective is not the perspective, but God's perspective is, and we surrender, in essence, what we know, not just for a little bit more knowledge and wisdom that we might gain later, but for the fear of the Lord. When we say, hey, I want to say, I don't know it all, I don't see it all, I don't get it all, I don't understand it all, but God certainly does. That arrow right there, that decision to make, that's where wisdom begins. When I lay down my perspective and kind of pick up God's perspective, the writer of Proverbs is going to say, man, that's really when it starts, right? We kind of say it this way. We find wisdom when we abandon our perspective and in favor of God's. Simple, right? Simple, but super profound. Because what's really fun is I can do this as a young person. I can do this as an older person. I can do this as a middle-aged person, right? It doesn't really matter. And what's even more fun is this. I can look at other people that have maybe gone before me and say, you know what? I want to be somebody that fears the Lord, and I want to look at other people that fear the Lord and have been practicing living that way, and I can gain wisdom and learn from them as they learn how to fear the Lord too. Right? Super simple, but not always obvious. It's not always obvious that this is how we should approach our life. That when we think about life, we tend to think, I'm going to do it better than I did before. I'm going to learn from the ways that I've messed things up. I'm going to learn from my mistakes, so to say. And maybe I'll even learn from some other people's mistakes. But instead of just gaining value from that, if we actually started and said, I'm going to think of the entirety of my life in all of the areas I might approach, and I'm going to start by saying, God, why wouldn't I start with you? You know it all and you see it all. You understand it all. I want your perspective. I want to tap into that as I engage you in relationship and begin to find you in your word. Okay, so there's some massive things that Proverbs are going to start to say about wisdom and how this starts to play out. Here's what he's going to say. Listen to this verse. Proverbs 3:13 through 15. He said, "Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver, yields better returns than gold. She's more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her." Man, he's like, if you could pick what to have, if I could give you just a pile full of gold, a huge pile of cash, some jewels, at the end of the day, wisdom is going to be more effective and productive and valuable than any of those things that I give to you. Nothing, literally nothing you could desire would be better than that. Why? Well, wisdom has the ability to make us skillful in any area of life, right? Not just in a financial realm. It can help us in any and every way. And I love that he says this, he says, blessed are those who find wisdom. Blessed are those who find wisdom. And here's part of what I want to make sure we're dialed into today, and where my heart is to dial in personally, is that I want to be somebody who goes after wisdom. Are we going to pick wisdom up along the way by the school of hard knocks? Absolutely. Totally, right? You're going to do that. That's not the same thing as being somebody who says, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to be somebody who finds it. I'm going to search it out. I want to go after wisdom. That's a little bit different. And we're going to see that as we go on more and more, that if I believe in the value of wisdom, that it's actually better than anything I could get on this planet, I'm going to approach it differently. I'm going to have a different attitude about it. I'm going to see my life differently, my life investment differently. If I believe it, I'm going to start to take to heart what the Proverbs says, right? I'm going to look and say the intentional pursuit of wisdom will multiply the wisdom that we gain, right? The intentional pursuit of wisdom is going to multiply the wisdom that we gain. So could you pick it up? For sure. But if I make a decision to go after it, and I'm going to say, I'm not just going to be reactive in wisdom showing up in my life and letting it kind of happen along the way. Now, I want to be proactive. I'm going to be somebody that's a little bit aggressive about going to get wisdom and going to find it. Look at this next verse. I love this. He says this. He just lays it real clear in 4:5 through 7. He says, get wisdom. Get understanding. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom, right? Just go get it. Go find it. Go after it. He says, though it cost you all you have, get understanding. Goes on, cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. Man, this is powerful. So here's the idea, saying recognition that everybody's in a life situation right now, right? I am set into a context in my life. I'm in college, or I'm in high school, or I'm a parent, or I'm single, right? I'm in a financial situation, trying to pay off debt, or I'm trying to save for a house, or we're trying to figure out what career we're in, trying to work. We all have a context that we're set in. And if the author of Proverbs was speaking to us today, he would say this, hey, what you should do is go figure out, what does wisdom look like? What does God's perspective look like in that situation right here and right now? Go after it. And if you go after it, it's going to protect you. Like this powerful kind of wisdom is kind of personified here as a powerful woman that will honor you and reward you and protect you and give you this idea of a crown, right? At the end of the day, when you look back in hindsight, after giving yourself to wisdom, she's going to take care of you. That's the idea. You're going to be really, really glad that you went after wisdom. And she will honor and protect and reward your pursuit of her. It's huge, right? It's a huge idea. Look at what it says next here in Proverbs 13:10. It says, where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Wisdom is found in those who take advice. So we could spend literally the entire morning looking at piece after piece after piece of wisdom about wisdom in the book of Proverbs. And I would encourage you to do that, man. If you just take a minute and go to your computer and type in wisdom in Bible Gateway. Never use Bible Gateway, do it, right? You can find every little passage and nook and cranny that Proverbs says about wisdom and read what it says. But at the end of the day, the heart of wisdom comes when I recognize that the perspective I have today is not the perspective. The perspective that God has is the one that I want to latch hold of, right? Because whenever I think I know, whenever I think I'm the one who has advice to give, and sometimes we do, guys, hear me, right? There's certainly wisdom that can be gained and shared, and that's a real thing. I understand that. But the heart of somebody who's wise is always going to think of themselves as a rookie. Making sense? Right? We're always going to think of ourselves as a rookie. We're going to recognize that while I have lived through some life situations and I've picked up some wisdom through the school of hard knocks, and I have some perspective now that I didn't have before, and maybe that perspective could help you, here's the reality, is right now I'm making mistakes that I don't even know I'm making. The reality is right now, I've never lived this season of my life before. And that's going to be true if you're 10 or 25 or 85. That you've never done this part before. So what that means is if I've never done this part before, I might have done other things before, but if I've never done this part before, I'm a rookie in this stage. Right? I'll give you an example. I've been a parent for 14 years. I got 4 kids. So have I been a parent for a little bit? Sure. I got a few miles under my belt, right? I've got more than 4 years being a parent, more than 10 years being a parent. I've been a parent for 14 years. I've learned some very difficult lessons, right, in those 14 years. I have never been a parent to a 14-year-old before. Never. It's brand new right now, right? I've never been a parent that has a boy and 3 girls between the ages of 14 and almost 9, right? Never been there before. Lori and I are going to be married 20 years coming up here in the next year. I've never been in this stage of marriage before. It's brand new. Never done it. It's fresh. I'm a rookie. I need wisdom on how to be a parent to teenagers. I need wisdom on how to be a married person in this next decade of our marriage and how we approach it. I don't have all the answers. Have I learned some things? And oh, totally. I've learned plenty, right? Learned a lot. And I don't yet know. I don't yet have it. I don't have it figured out. I need wisdom to approach the next piece, and I want to stay hungry, and I want to have that rookie mindset in this next phase that I'm in. This is what the writer of Proverbs is talking about. He's saying, man, you know where strife comes from? When there's pride. When everybody's looking at each other and they're saying, I know. You don't know, I know. I have the way. You don't have the way, I have the way. And teachability closes off. That's where conflict and strife comes from. He says, wisdom is found in those who are people who take advice, who are the rookies. Man, that's where you're going to find it. I want to be that way. I bet you want to be that way. Right? We don't want to be the people that are closed off to hearing counsel and receiving feedback. I don't want to stop learning because I've lived a handful of years more than I had a decade ago. Right? I want to be somebody that continues on and grows in wisdom. And here at Grace, we are just passionate about living life with Jesus. We're passionate about living life with Jesus. It's what we believe Jesus came for. He didn't come to condemn. He didn't come to destroy. He came to give us life and invite us into a relationship. That's why he came to the planet and lived a perfect life and died an innocent death and rose victoriously over the grave. Right? To invite you and I into a relationship that we could know him and that he could know us. as we do that, as we get to know Jesus, we live life with him, here's one of the things we're going to find. I love this verse. Check this passage out. It's phenomenal. One of the things we discover about Jesus is that he himself is going to help us gain hold of wisdom because he himself is where wisdom is found. Look at what this says in Colossians 2. The Apostle Paul, leader in the early church, wrote this. He says that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Man, that's amazing. What are we saying here? We're saying in Jesus, this person that we're passionate about living life with, that he himself, he's the one who has all this perspective, right? He lived in fear of the Lord, so to say, when he was on the planet, and he is the Lord. And as I get to know Jesus, I'm getting closer to all of the mysteries of knowledge and wisdom. Jesus, right, just fathom this with me, he knows more than all of the PhDs of the planet all put together. He has the expertise, right, more than any expertise of all of the people on the planet. He understands history and science and every discipline that we might study. He understands every mistake that could be made, and he actually understands us individually and knows our own personal weaknesses and tendencies and probabilities of how we might falter or fail and what we're susceptible to. He has all that, got all that on lockdown. And he invites us into a relationship that we might know him and also that we might find wisdom in him, right? In a relationship with him. It's phenomenal to know. So this super practical series of how to find wisdom, all of this at the end of the day is going to be what we would find in Jesus, right? The practical stuff of Proverbs, we're going to find it ultimately in the person of Christ because he is the ultimate holder of all wisdom. And by wisdom, actually, the scriptures would say that he's the one who created the world. Fascinating. So where do we go from here? How do we kind of land the conversation and walk away? And certainly week to week, as we dive into these conversations, we're going to see wisdom show up in different places, different arenas of life. But the thing I think we have to start with today is almost a temperature gauge of our own heart of how eager am I today for wisdom? Right? Well, what's my openness to hearing advice and to looking for counsel and wisdom? Right? How do I go get it? How do I find it? And so here's some questions that I'd love us to kind of wrap up and land with today. These are questions I'm asking myself. Here's the first one. Is there someone with wisdom that has access to every part of my life today? Say that again. Is there someone with wisdom, with this kind of wisdom, that has access to every part of my life today? When we think about where we are, who we're dating, how our marriage is going, what kind of investments we're making in parenting, what kind of financial decisions we might make. Right now, is there anybody who's close enough in to your life that they could look in and say, we could go to them and say, here's some wisdom in this area. Or we could ask them and show them, open that arena of our life up and say, could you give me feedback and some counsel on this? Do we have anybody that close in? Or are we disconnected from anyone like that? And if we were really honest, if we go to make decisions, do we kind of just make the decisions we want to make rather than getting counsel on them first? It's a question to look at. Here's another one, kind of ties into it. When we go to make a big decision, right? When we go to make a big decision, do we seek counsel on that decision? It's a great question. When we're going to buy a home, we're going to go to get married, when we go to job change, right, whatever that looks like, do we go and ask someone else's advice, humbling ourselves to have feedback come into our space, right? At the risk of being a little bit humbled by that feedback, having to have a little bit painful, and maybe even surrendering the decision altogether, because we might discover that we weren't seeing something that we thought we were seeing because we tapped into the fear of the Lord, right? When there's a big decision on the table, do we go find help for that? Here's another question. Are we in a growth mode right now? Like, are we in a rookie mindset today? I was asking myself, just praying about this week. I'm asking myself, Lord, am I as hungry today as I was 20 years ago when we first got married? Right? Because when I first got married to Lori, here's what I knew. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I grew up in a family with some divorce. I knew that I was high risk. I've shared this before. I knew that I was a high risk person to marry, and that if I didn't do marriage well, that our marriage would probably be at risk because I knew I came in with some baggage. Right? What that did in me is that caused me to approach marriage with some intensity, with some zeal. I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to grow. And so I'm gut checking myself this week and saying, am I still as hungry to know my wife and to have a marriage that honors Christ as I was 20 years ago, right, when we first got married? Those are questions I'm asking myself. How about you? Is there a rookie mindset? Is there a rookie mindset? And here's maybe a symptom of not having one. If you find yourself saying statements of arrival, if you sound like you've arrived somewhere and you're done, you got it all wrapped up, then you're not acting like a rookie. Okay? You're not living as a rookie. No longer is that hunger or that edge there. Here's the next question. Do you simply have a mentor? Right? Not just somebody to give you counsel every once in a while and know you, but do you have a mentor that's walking with you in an arena of life that can help you to move forward? Here's the last one, probably the most important one. It's very simply, have you embraced the fear of the Lord? At the end of the day, do I recognize that there is an authority in the room and it's not me? Right? There is a God who knows me, who sees me, who I'm accountable to for every word, every decision, every action, every thought. And Jesus would pay for the flaws that I have made in all those arenas, the sins that I've made. And there's a reality. I'm gonna see him someday, right? And there's a healthy fear. And here's what I would say. If you have not bumped into the fear of the Lord, if you've never recognized, wow, my life is not really mine. I was bought with a price, the Bible would say. I don't rise and fall to me. Jesus literally traded his life. He exchanged his perfection for my imperfection. He gave me life, bought me back from the dead. Now the life that I live is really, it's for him, it's his. And I want to answer one day for that life. Is the fear of the Lord a thing? Or I find myself thinking, well, nobody knows about this. I'm not going to get caught. If I'm operating as if I rise and fall to myself, then the fear of the Lord is not here, and I would argue wisdom has not begun. Right? So guys, these are heart questions for us. And I'm excited because I think when we start to humble ourselves and ask some of these tough questions, what it does is it turns the valve again on growth. It turns the valve again on learning. And it opens us up to continue to advance into what God wants us to be, which is awesome. It's powerful. I'm going to have the band come up, guys. I'd love for us to continue to wrestle those questions through and interact directly with Jesus. Would you pray with me as we sing and worship and be together here a little bit more? Father, we want to say thank you Thanks for your word, God, that you have allowed us to see what we could never see on our own. The perspective and the vantage point that is unlimited. Right? It's limited only by who you are. God, thank you for giving us access to some of that, and that we are not bound by our own flawed perspective of life. Lord, I pray that you would put within us a hunger to know you, to be changed by you, to live and to love well. God, give us a passion and a desire for wisdom. And would you speak to our hearts this morning about how open we are to that? Lord, we love you, Jesus. Thank you for being the man of wisdom, where all true wisdom is found. Lord, meet us here.